Hello, everybody! It is your boy Pred here with another overly long, overly opinionated, overly rambling tier list video. Yay! I know I did promise the Dead Space Let's Play at some point in time, but quick disclosure for anyone wondering, I done lost my job about a week ago, which sucks, but hey, it happens. And so I don't really have the cash right now to buy new games. I'm trying to keep a steady stream, keep my emergency funds up in case anything were to happen as far as, shit being an emergency. I am trying to find a job at some point, because I know YouTube doesn't pay the bills, and I this is just for fun, not for profit. But regardless, I still, you know, still got to be cautious of that, so to say. But that doesn't. So Dead Space the remake is coming at some point. When? I don't know, but I do have other videos down the pipeline, so please bear with me. But regardless, why don't I just do another tier list video? I mean, my last couple of tier list videos have actually managed to go kind of well, I think. Positive reception to them, certainly. Uh, I know they're cheap and they're easy and they're lazy, but hey, I never did say I was a very original content creator. I mean, I'm harkening back to the days of old school Let's Playing, before idiots with face cam could scream into a microphone all the time and be obnoxious for like views and stuff like that. Not that I'm not an idiot that screams into a mic and is obnoxious in my Let's Plays. I don't mean to be, but hey, just how it is. I, I don't try to deny it. But regardless, let us get into the topic of today's video: Timesplitters. Now, for those of you who were born from my generation and are, pretty cool about this, and if you do recognize this series and are pretty cool, thank you for that. You are awesome, and I appreciate you. You already know what Timesplitters is. Others may be like, what's Timesplitters? Where's that from? Well, for the uninitiated, Timesplitters was a first-person shooter made back in the early to mid 2000s. It was designed by Free Radical Entertainment, who were basically a bunch of ex-Rareware employees that worked on GoldenEye and Perfect Dark. They decided, hey, let's make our own company, and so they did, and they made the Timesplitters series, and everything was wonderful. And then they made Haze for the PS3, which was a complete and utter flop that killed him dead. But with a couple of rumors in the pipeline, now that THQ Nordic has acquired everything from Free Radical, uh, as far as IPs, including the Timesplitters franchise, and there are rumors of a Timesplitters 4 coming out at some point. Hopefully those rumors are true, but fingers crossed. And the Timesplitters Rewind fan project is starting to get some form of traction. Again, fingers crossed that does eventually manage to see the light of day. I figured it would be, well, also because I've been replaying, you know, the second and third games quite a bit recently. I figured it would be time to go through all the single player levels across all three games and just rank them. I mean, all these tiers, as you can see, are pretty self-explanatory. Once again, there are no caveats as to where it is. I just kind of take everything into account as to how I rank these levels. So I take into account design, both as far as the level design and but just like overall level. So a couple caveats here. As far as me ranking these, I kind of take everything into account. So first big one is level design. How does it look aesthetically? How do the enemies look as far as variety goes? What kind of atmosphere it creates? All that good stuff. You know, music does go into some way to the presentation as well because music is important and these games have really kick-ass music. Next is going to be the gameplay and turn general difficulty, because as anyone who's played through Time Splitters knows, difficulty is very dependent on what level you play on is very dependent of of what your experience is. In fact, some levels in certain games are actually shorter if you play on a particular difficulty setting than if you were to bump it up to a harder one. So, but these games are also notorious for being pretty Nintendo hard, as you might expect from the guy from former Rareware employees. Man, that's so weird to say. Just normally. So keep that in mind. Some of these are like really. When I say they're difficult, I mean they are frustratingly difficult. Like some of the cheapest bullshit that has ever gone through it. But I've beaten all these levels on hard mode twice. So I know what I'm talking about, Sonny Jim. And then the final thing is just, fun factor. I guess that's kind of how it is just how much fun I have with these levels. Do I replay them? Do I not? Do I just kind of think they're everything? Yeah, this is just me rambling. But of course, one important disclaimer, caveat, what have you. This is my opinion. All right, this is my own personal opinion. I am not putting any objective facts into this. I'm not putting any objective thought into this. This is not the definitive end all be all. This is just my opinion. And I know that is such a no shit Sherlock thing to say, but in the year of our Lord 2023, where public discourse and where civil public discourse is more or less deader than disco at this point, you kind of have to be a bit blunt about your intentions for, let's just say, not exactly the most intelligent people on the face of the planet. The kind of people who very much prove the age old adage of you are the reason why we have warning labels on shampoo bottles kind of people. Just saying. But regardless, let's get into it. And this is formatted a bit weird. I don't know why the person who made this did what he or she did as far as formatting it. But we're going to start with the first game, which is probably the worst game of the series in my opinion. I'm not even like saying it's bad for the time or because whenever I say like games from back then are bad or what have you, there's a difference between a game that hasn't aged well for itself and a game that even by the context of its time is pretty mediocre at best. Timesplitters, the first game falls into the latter category because I mean, it's the only game that's a PlayStation exclusive, a PS2 exclusive only. Not that that's a big loss for Xbox or GameCube players because the first game sucks. Very minimalist presentation, a lot of unrefined edges to it, a lot of fake difficulty to it. Not really the most deep or complex plot. It very much was relying on a very arcade style of gameplay, which is fine, don't get me wrong, but when you're, trying to create something, any form of intertwining plot is better than no plot at all. Um, for games like this. I mean, even Doom had a fucking plot, but the first Time Splitters game didn't. And some of the design, like some of the character designs are not that memorable, or if they're memorable, they're for all the wrong reasons. And there's just a very distinct lack of identity to it compared to Time Splitters 2 and Future Perfect. I mean, that those are when the games really became its own sort of thing. But the first game, there's very much this generic, you know, early late '90s, late '90s shooter aesthetic, where it kind of curbs from everything with its very crude golden eye influences showing through, so to speak. So I don't look at the first game very fondly. In fact, if you go to a lot of Time Splitters fans, are probably and ask them, is the first game your favorite? They're probably going to either say hell no or there's a first game. Should kind of tell you the ubiquity of the sequels. But regardless, let's actually go through the first game, starting with the first level, which is the tomb level. The tomb level is uh okay. So another thing that I have to kind of explain is that in the first game, it very when I say arcade style, it very much has this thing of you're dropped into a level, you have to go through, you have to collect a specific item, you have to run all the way back to the beginning of the level with said item, and if you die at any point, you have to restart from the beginning. There are no checkpoints, there are no like save spots or anything like that, which makes it a hell of a lot more difficult than it actually needs to be. And it also you are judged for a time limit, not just overall, but for each difficulty level. And considering the difficulty of the levels in question, ooh, just fuck you, Free Radical. So I have to put that in mind. It's a very monotonous, tedious, frustrating experience to go through. But still, um, starting off the first level, the tomb level, basically it's set in 1935 in Egypt. And you have to go in, get an Ankh, and go back to the portal. You fight basically a bunch of cultists wielding Tommy guns and blunderbusses and pistols. And then when you get into the actual tombs itself, there are mummies and zombies and other undead creatures. As a starter level, it does have some things going for it. It's very distinct, very stereotypically Egyptian in its appearance, but it does have some flavor. The music's not too bad, all things considered. The enemy variety is kind of cool. I mean, there is another gameplay mechanic to the first game that I'll get into at a later time. But for being a starting level, it's got some charm to it, but I wouldn't exactly say it's great. Especially when you actually get into the pyramid itself, it does have this very confusing kind of maze-like architecture where everything is sort of the same. A lot of a lot of where you need to go is very ill defined. That could be a criticism for some of the levels in the game, but generally speaking, the level design is smart enough and clever enough that you always kind of know where to go, even if they do seem a lot more expansive. This kind of doesn't. But there's some good bright spots in it, but it's just kind of so yeah, let's put it in the mediocre tier. Next up is the Chinese level. This is probably the only level in the game that has become kind of iconic, and at least from the first game that's become iconic because it was used as a multiplayer map in both Timesplitters 2 and Timesplitters Future Perfect. And there's a reason for it. It's because it's a damn good level. There's a lot of verticality and great architecture to it. The music, while very stereotypically kind of 70s kung fu um, sort of beats to it, is very memorable. It's very catchy. Really does make you feel like you're in a really does make you feel like you're a kung fu badass. Um, and for the most part, I think the difficulty is balanced enough to where it does pose a good challenge, but it doesn't feel frustrating, even on the harder difficulties. The only thing really holding it back is just that it's in Time Splitters 1 for the most part. So it's a good level. It's a good, solid level. I think it's a better multiplayer level than it is maybe a single player level. I think if it was in a if it was in a if it was in either 2 or 3 set as a single player level with all the mechanics and the polish that um 2 and Future Perfect had, I think it would be, great, maybe ultimate tier, but it's hampered by the first game. But it's still good. Still good. I think it's the only good level in the game, I'll be honest here. Um Next up is the Den. Um Really the only thing that's memorable about the Cyber Den is that that's where the badass cyborg comes from, who's again a multiplayer only character that appeared in both 2 and Future Perfect. He's kind of a staple of a lot of these weird recurring characters throughout all 3 games. other than that, though, other than the badass cyborg being in there, it's very dingy, drab looking level set in like an industrial complex or something. There's not really too much memorable about it. I think some of that may be fault of the art design, but also think that some of it may also be that the graphics just don't hold up, and the art direction I feel like is very bland and generic. The music, I don't even remember the music in that, and there's a lot of verticality to it, to where it feels very frustrating because enemies will take cheap shots at you from up in scaffoldings and up on walkways and stuff like that. And considering the clunky movement and aiming controls of the first game, you definitely get your cheap shots in, and I think the time limits are pretty unreasonable for it. Get very mediocre level. Um, but that's just how it is. Next up is the village level. I mean, it has some potential to it. I kind of do like this very Lovecraftian sort of tone and vibe that it's going for, where you're facing off against a bunch of weird mutants, including actual literal fishwives and fish people. They act like zombies as well, which I think is a bit disappointing in all honesty. And it's got a very nice atmosphere to it, but I don't really remember the music to it in all honesty, and it just again, just because of the art direction and the very same kind of gameplay, what could be a really cool level if it was in the later games, it's just kind of boring. So yeah. Chemical plant, you're in the 80s, you're a cop trying to bust a bunch of drug smugglers. Kind of the same problem that Cyberden has. Not very memorable music. The art direction is very generic feeling. There's a lot of verticality, which precludes a lot of cheap shots, and it just feels very, very boring. So there's that. Planet X. Ugh. Planet X is I really don't like that level. First off, big generic rock planet. I think that the sequel, that Timesplitters 2's take on Planet X, is a much more memorable sort of level. Again, just based on the stronger art direction. The alien designs that you face are kind of cool, but no, actually they are pretty cool. I think with a new coat of polish, they would be very memorable enemies as well. But the big kick in the dick for me is that depending on the difficulty level you are on, the route changes all the time. Now you might think to yourself, that's actually not that bad of an idea. Why would you complain about something like that? Because you're still imposed by the time limit in order to unlock the best stuff, but because of the fact that it changes, and I'm not just talking about like little changes. I'm talking like the whole layout of the level fucking flips on its head depending on the difficulty of it. It's a very confusing mess, especially considering that because of the very samey looking environments, you have no way to go. You have no idea where to go or what to even do, and a lot of the sci-fi weapons feel very unsatisfying. That's kind of a complaint I have in the game as a whole. Ironic being a sci-fi shooter that the sci-fi weapons are the least satisfying weapons to use, but hey, what can you do? Um, but it's just because of that. I mean, I appreciate the concept in theory. In practice, ugh, it's just yeah. I'm gonna say it's pretty bad. Not quite as bad as the mansion level. Fuck this level. Oh, the idea of it is really really cool. You're going through a haunted mansion, killing zombies, and trying to get like a bag of bones. Seems simple enough. But here's the kicker about this level. In the original Time Splitters, you could only kill the undead by shooting their heads off. Now you might think to yourself, well, that's a stupid complaint to talk about. I mean, a lot of zombie media is very much like that. You know, you got to shoot them in the head in order to put them down for good. Well, how about the fact that they don't necessarily stay down? You have to blow their heads off, or else they get up like 15 seconds later and just attack you. How about the fact that that some zombies in question wield shotguns that on the higher difficulties will easily one-shot you from across the goddamn map? How about the fact that there are like turrets mounted on the walls just to add another layer of complexity that take way too much ammo to take down? Combine that with the, you know, pretty janky aiming mechanics of the first game. Like, to give you an example of how difficult it is, on the easy on hard mode, and I in hard mode, fuck this level on hard mode. Fuck Mansion on hard mode. Anyone who's ever had to suffer through that knows exactly what I'm talking about. Fuck Mansion on hard mode. Um the time limit to get the best absolute reward, 9 minutes 45 seconds. 9 minutes, 45 seconds. And keep in mind, even on hard mode, in a lot of the games, which is again why I don't like the time limit restrictions and the time limit things on it. In order to get the best, you usually have to beat the level on hard mode in 2, 3, maybe 4 minutes. 9 minutes and 45 seconds. They knew this level was bullshit. And it's a shame because the design of it's really cool. There's a lot of unique, there's a lot of unique rooms that don't repeat, so it actually does feel like a mansion. The music, I don't remember it, but I think it's all right. And the zombie designs are cool as well, but just for the fucking difficulty of it, just for how absolutely relentless it is. Like, to put this into perspective, playing hard mode on this is like trying to play through, like, imagine trying to play through Doom Eternal on Ultra Nightmare mode, or something like that. You know those like really difficult. No, 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 no. I got a perfect comparison to it. I got a perfect comparison to it. Imagine if you were playing, what was it? What was that really tough level from Halo 2? I think I wanted to say it was like the something highway, or think of a really tough level from the Halo games. Think of trying to do it on legendary difficulty. Trying to get through it on legendary difficulty. And you had no checkpoints whatsoever. If you died, you started the whole level from square one. That's what Mansion on hard mode in Timesplitters 1 is like. Just take an already difficult level on even some of the easier difficulties, magnify the damage of everything being thrown at you, and expect to do it all in one go. Many a controller has been snapped in rage because of this. Yeah, fuck that level. Docs, I don't really have much to say about it. Again, it goes into the same problem I have with all the other Timesplitter 1's levels. Generic art design, boring enemies, not memorable music, just being in Timesplitters 1. And the Spaceways! It's got kind of cool music. It's got inventive designs. The architecture is nice. I could definitely see it with the polished art style, but the later games. But again, just you can see Timesplitters 1 is not necessarily the best game. Not best game. No, 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 Sonny Jim. No, no. Okay, now we actually move on to the levels where I can talk about them in length. which is a very bad thing for my audience because, I always like to ramble on a bit, but still, I'll try my best to compartmentalize it. Let's move on to the sequel, Timesplitters 2, where everything got good. And we start with the Siberia level, which is basically one big love letter to the dam level from GoldenEye 64. Uh, what can I say about this level? I mean, first of all, it's got a very, 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 it's got a solid direction. The dam has a very memorable kind of look to it, despite being a bunch of hallways. You start off in the snow amongst buildings, and and it still manages to look very nice and crisp, even today. The gameplay itself, the sharper gameplay easily helps, but there's a lot of variety in the level. You start off trying to sneak into a dam with security cameras and everything. th- with taking out security cameras and guards. If the security camera spot you, then the alarm sounds and you got to fight off a bunch of guards, which, does blow your cover. But at least the stealth doesn't feel ridiculously limiting because you do have plenty of silenced weapons. The cameras are very easy to kind of track where their movements are. You do have the temporal uplink that shows you the cone of vision and kind of where to avoid as they sweep. So surprisingly enough, it's actually very easy to stealth it. And then you get into the second half where apparently it turns out that zombies are populating the underground, so you got to shoot the zombies in the head. But unlike in Time Splitters 1, you can actually kill zombies with some firepower. I mean, it's going to take a bit because, well, they take a lot of ammo, but you don't have to at least shoot them in the head. And the aiming controls are, better to where shooting them in the head isn't actually that big of a challenge. And then you fight off against mutants, and then the level ends with you shooting down a Hindy helicopter on top of the dam with a turret. There's a lot of variety to it. The music is fantastic. All the enemy designs are memorable, even for being like kind of generic military mooks. They do have, they are pretty memorable. It's just a solid level all around. It's probably, if I had to quantify it objectively, I could objectively quantify it as the best level in the entire franchise. It's certainly my favorite level of the entire franchise. I never get bored with it, no matter how many times I played through it. So yeah, Ultimate Tier it is. Next up is Chicago, uh, where you are playing a hard-boiled private eye detective in Prohibition era Chicago trying to take down a mobster. Pretty simple enough. I mean, the art design looks fantastic. It does have that very Art Deco inspired feel to it to really make you feel like you belong in that era of late 20s, early 30s, Prohibition era, big city. The soundtrack is amazing. It does have this very smooth, jazz inspired, private eye sort of um, leitmotif to it that makes it really memorable. And again, captures the mood well, especially considering that a lot of the voice acting is very much, you get the grizzled, hard, hard-assed private eye narration in the beginning. All the mooks speak in very noticeable Chicagoan dialects, which I don't know how accurate they are. Some of them are cheesy because because you can tell that a lot of them are British blokes trying to pass off with American accents. But hey, it adds to the charm. You get your standard array, and there is something nice about just mowing down mobsters with a Tommy gun. I can't really say a lot bad about it. The only thing I will say bad about it is um there are a couple of cheap sniper locations, especially on the ladder on the harder difficulties that can really take your health off in a second, especially when they get super accurate on hard mode. If you don't know where they are, that can be a bit frustrating. But other than that, it's a solid level. I'd easily say it's I'd, hmm I put it in great tier only for the locations of the snipers on harder difficulties being a bit cheap. Next up, Notre Dame. You basically have to stop a crazy mad mad cultist man from sacrificing virgins in order to summon Timesplitters. Uh, the art design of it is fantastic. You know, you go through like the sewers of Paris and then eventually get into the cathedral itself, and there's a very dark, ominous gothic architecture to the proceedings. It really does have this very bleak, gloomy, oppressive feel, while still managing to very, at least for the time, accurately um, render the inside of Notre Dame Cathedral and make it feel very alive, even though you are fighting off against zombies and skeletons in preacher robes wielding Lugers. It's a weird game series, okay? Um, the music is really nice as well. You know, you've got I think it's meant to be a combination of two pieces of classical music. I don't know exactly what they are. I want to say one of them is I want to say one of them is either Amadeus or Beethoven. Could be wrong on that. Someone can easily correct me, but the music is very memorable. It manages to create again that very impressive gothic style atmosphere and horror based tone to the level that makes it feel very oppressive, makes it incredibly oppressive. You're shooting zombies in the head and shooting skeleton guys. You know, you do face off against a big, like, weird demon kind of dude called the Portal Demon, but he's called the Corporalite in the multiplayer. Big, like, kind of hoofed, sort of tusked thing. I don't know how to describe him, but you face off against a big guy that big version that really just dodge a laser blast and shoot him with a shotgun until he dies. And then you do face off against Shock and on top of the Notre Dame Cathedral in the rain while the church bells play and everything. It's a cool level. I think I think there are only two things that let it down. One is you do have to rescue all the not the virgins, the maidens throughout the game. And some of the locations, this is more prominent on hard mode, but but some of the zombies do tend to go after them. And if you're not careful with your aim or you're not quick on the draw, they'll easily take them out and cause you to fail. The other is the section where a bunch of zombies spawn into the last maiden who's in the middle of the pews basically while some guy who I think is supposed to be the hunchback of Notre Dame comes in with a shotgun, and you have to basically help defend him and the maiden from the hordes of zombies. On normal mode, you could basically just let this guy just take care of the zombies because his aim is actually pretty solid, and you know, he manages to take the zombies out. A couple hits, he's got unlimited ammo. So you're kind of just left there scratching your ass and not really doing anything. And also on hard mode, there are some cheap moments there with flaming zombies, especially on the spiral staircases, where you will find zombies on fire coming towards you in confined areas, and there's no way to extinguish them as well. So that's always nice. Other than those few gripes, though, they're not really enough to deter me from saying that it's a fantastic level. So, yeah, Ultimate tier there. Speaking of Planet X, like I was talking about before, Return to Planet X is actually a different beast altogether. The level design still is very kind of, you know, Red Planet sort of generic sci-fi sort of thing. And there's not a whole lot of enemy variety to it. Basically, you're fighting off against two goofy looking enemies who are basically just literal palette swaps of each other, as well as bees, annoying bees with annoying buzzing noises that swarm you. That's about it for the enemy variety, other than the Reaper splitters that show up toward the end. But by that point, you got the time crystal and you can just GTFO out of there. They do try to throw some variety in there, but I don't think it works 100%. Like the beach defense section on on hard mode is nigh on impossible, where you have to basically take control of turrets and gun down a bunch of invading guys, a bunch of invading aliens that spawn in on a beach, which, considering hard modes increase difficulty, is can become an exercise in frustration if you're frustration, especially due to them just spawning in all around you and the turrets running out of ammo at the most inopportune uh, moments. Also, the section where you're shooting down like escaping UFO saucers is a cool idea, but honestly, the turret sections, apart from the High D helicopter fight in Siberia, are pretty boring and monotonous, and not exactly fun. Just because they feel pretty clunky for pretty clunky even by the standards of the time, and two, they're just kind of too simple. Um, the music's cool. The music track is pretty cool. Is is pretty cool, but other than that, it's just you know, it's all right. It's in the all right tier. I'm not gonna say it's a fantastic level because I think there are too many problems with it, but it does have some highlights and moments. Neo Tokyo. Ugh. Would you like to? Would you like to have uh, a stealth section level for the first half of the game? Well, you're getting a fourth stealth section level in the first stealth section of the first half of the level. Does that sound like fun to you? No, no, it's not. That's really the big problem with Neo Tokyo as the level is just the first half of it, where you have to basically very slowly fall tail a hacker who you're trying to get into a hide in order to get into her hideout. And if you're spotted once, you automatically fail the mission. And considering that on the higher difficulties, you have to contend with cop cars patrolling the streets, security cameras everywhere, and and on some difficulties, if you shoot one of them out, then you attract the wrath of the popo, and they cause you to fail. And on hard mode, the hacker turns herself invisible with like predator style camo, which is pretty annoying on a dark and dingy, rainy level like this. Um, and then even with that, you have to follow her into it, which only has a second, which only has like a small time frame window because it's controlled by a laser gate being, controlled by someone else. So if the person in the laser gate spots you, that's game over. If you missed a window of opportunity, that's game over. And you have to get on the security cameras in order to get her password because if you don't manage to do it, to actually see her, type in the password, game over. So there's a lot of it's a very strict sense of it's a very strict time limit and timing based kind of level. And even though the stealth in Timesplitters 2, like I said, actually isn't that bad, all things considered, it's still if it's not frustrating, it's tediously boring, which is a shame because I like the general aesthetic and the presentation of Neo Tokyo. It's okay. It's very obviously curbed from Blade Runner, and it's way too optimistic of what we thought Tokyo would look like in 2019. But it's still a very distinct art design, and the music is really nice as well. I mean, listen to the Neo Tokyo theme at some point. It's an incredible piece of music. It's just a shame that you know the level around it, the mechanics around it, really let it down. So unfortunately, it's mediocre. It's not terrible. The presentation and from an aesthetic and musical standpoint saves it from being terrible, but you know, is what it is. Wild Wild, Wild West, Jim West, Desperado. No, I'm not gonna inflict that with you. Yep, it's the good old fashioned Wild Wild West, and it was a pretty straightforward level. You're basically just shooting up a bunch of outlaws and busting people out of jail and saving damsels in distress and all this other stuff. I mean, it looks like a big Wild West themed theme park, but it's distinctive enough. The music slaps really hard. Very much this mix of Enrico Morricone's spaghetti western tracks and a lot of Lone Ranger kind of thematic thematic music kind of mushed together, but it's memorable. It manages to be really badass. And it's just a good old fashioned, no bullshit, no like big brain level. You just go around shooting bad guys with a 6 shooter. The only thing I will have to I can't complain about is that on hard mode it does seem like everybody punches like they put extra loads of gunpowder into their cartridges beforehand, so it hits like a motherfucker. And especially in the final part of the level where you're in like a big open mine shaft where the big bad and all his cronies come out to get you and attack you from all angles. That can be impossible on hard mode, especially if you don't have the health or armor necessary to take the onslaught of hits that are going to come for you. But other than that, I honestly think this is an underrated level. In all honesty, it's a good solid level. I won't say it's great, but it's good. It's good. More than I could say for Atom Smasher though. Ugh. I mean, the premise of Ab Smasher seems cool enough, this very James Bond, secret agent man kind of pastiche, but the level design really doesn't do it any favors here. It's very drab, generic, industrial complex with a lot of grays to it. The music isn't all that memorable either, but the worst part about it is just the level itself. Like for the first for the majority of the level, you are on a strict time limit because there are a bunch of bombs lying around. And you think to yourself, oh, I'll just defuse them. Nope, you can't defuse them. You have to basically save scientists that are nearby and have them defuse it for you. And if they die, well, you're screwed. And in fact, the only time you actually do disarm a bomb for yourself is when you have to use like a magnet to attach like a crane magnet to one of the bombs itself and then drop it in the garbage disposal. Easier said than done, considering that the magnet itself just doesn't want to attach to it for the majority of the time. The controls are really stiff and awkward, and there's a very, very, very small window of opportunity that the game really doesn't tell you about where you have to get it in exactly right. Even if it looks like you've gotten it in perfectly, for some reason the bomb will go off and kill you instantly and you fail it. Because that's fun, right? On top of that, you're basically facing off against a bunch of banana colored jumpsuit wearing mooks with Sam Fisher goggles, or a bunch of black jumpsuit wearing mooks with Sam Fisher goggles. And they are fucking everywhere throughout the level. They will attack behind you, they will attack above you, they will attack side to side, and they hurt like a motherfucker when it comes to how much damage they could actually do, especially on hard mode. This, this on hard mode, I have no doubt that this level on hard mode is the point where a lot of people who tried going through hard mode in this game just said, fuck it, I'm done, and rage quit. Because it's tooth pullingly infuriating trying to get through it. I myself, even after trying to do it, you know, I think of like last year or 2 years ago, even me going through hard mode again on a different save file, it took me like 15 tries before I finally managed to get success. That's how freaking infuriating it was. And considering that there's only like one checkpoint throughout the entire level and it's in the first 25% of the mission, that means that all that hard work and progress can instantly get wiped out and you're starting from like 10, 15 minutes back to where the checkpoint was. It's ugh, just the absolute worst. Next up are the Aztec ruins. I got very mixed feelings about this. There are some cool elements to the Aztec ruins. I do like the general aesthetic of it. I do like the very tribal-esque music to it. On the harder difficulties, you do end up actually going into the temple and the music changes. So that's a pretty cool touch, all things considered. But there's a lot of stupid gameplay gimmicks that really drag the level down. Like, first off, you face off against like the angry local natives with the who are wielding crossbows and stuff like that. That's fair enough. But then you've got things like, golems made out of wood that can only be killed by fire. Well, how do you kill them by fire? Well, you got to light a crossbow bolt on fire first. How do you light a crossbow bolt on fire? Well, there's torches around. Do they sometimes register? Yeah, it really kind of depends on the angle you're going to. And oh, and by the way, if you reload at any point in your 4-shot magazine, your fire goes out and you have to do it all over again. So better not miss, boy. And they can also light you on fire as well if they're close enough. Have fun. Um, and then there's like, you know, and then there's moments where, like and then you also have beehives that also have to be taken out by fire. But the swarm of bees you can't actually kill, and they'll keep damaging you consistently, even if you manage to take out the beehive in question. They'll still just follow you everywhere. How about one of those annoying rotating block/tile puzzles where you have this like 4 direction tile puzzle, and you have to basically line it up to where all the symbols kind of match and are looking at each other and coalesce to one another in order to unlock it. How about a section in the temple itself where there's a bunch of unkillable stone golems that hit really hard, and you have to rely on trap doors in order to kill them. But the trap doors work on a specific timing or work on a specific timing pattern, or a specific activation pattern, and you can easily fall into the trapdoors yourself, and it's game over. While there's monkeys throwing exploding watermelons at you. How about a section on a bridge where you have to shoot a bunch of faces that turn, and when they reveal the skulls, you have to shoot them, but the skulls shoot lasers at you, and you have to do it pretty quick in order to shoot the skulls. They take about, a good 15 or so seconds in order to fully rotate over to the next face. How about a dodging boulder section, a la Indiana Jones, that can get really finicky sometimes? You know, all this kind of stuff. It feels like it's very gimmicky. It feels like they're trying too much to be different and trying to like shake up the formula, but the end result is you've got a bunch of these little idiosyncratic mechanics and functions that only work for this section and this section alone. And it instantly kills the pacing of it. So good aesthetic, good enemy design, good music. I just wish the gameplay was more refined, so it's all right. Oh, the Robot Factory. If Atom Smasher was the point where a lot of people gave up on the game, Robot Factory on hard mode will make you question your very existence and the existence of a just and loving God in general. Um, I'll say this much from an aesthetics point of view, it's actually very solid. I do like the robot designs. I do like that there's a big variety of robot enemies in there, like turrets that turn into spider bots, floating robots, robots on conveyor belts and stuff like that. It gives you a nice variety of everything going on. The level design is very dark and atmospheric. The music itself is very dark and atmospheric, creates a nice tone to it. But oh, the gameplay, oh, the fucking gameplay. Because on normal mode, it's tough enough. On hard mode, it's borderline impossible if you don't know what you're doing. Because the main difficulty comes from the fact that a lot of the chassis bots, they're weak foes, fair enough. The sentry bots, though, oof, they're these big, slow, lumbering motherfuckers who have either, you know, the plasma auto rifle, which could tear your health down in seconds, or the laser gun, which is an admittedly very awkward, cumbersome, really bad weapon in all respects, but they can easily take you down in a couple shots because theirs is basically powerful and accuracy tuned. And they take a lot of punishment to kill. They take a lot of punishment to kill. So you figure, well, what about the laser gun? Too slow, cumbersome, even if it does enough damage. Well, why don't I just use a plasma auto rifle? You don't have enough ammo. And yes, you do get plasma grenades for it, but I guarantee you on hard mode, you will not have enough plasma grenades, and it takes at least 2 or 3 of them to put them down. They are tough sons of bitches to 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 kill. The only weapon you're relying on for the most part is the sci-fi handgun, which is a 3-round burst handgun because I love burst fire modes and modes you can't turn on and off in video games. It's one of my favorite things ever. Um, that also has bullets that ricochet, which means you get hit and hurt by your own ammo just as much as the enemies get hurt by it. Yay! And there's only one other weapon in there called the Electro Tool, but it basically only paralyzes enemies. It doesn't actually kill them, and you need them to overcharge a bunch of nodes in the to progress through. There's one section in particular where there is a big open room. Actually, no, that's not true. You do get one other weapon, the homing rocket launcher. Problem is, so do the enemies as well. There is one particular section of the game where you are facing off against a bunch of sentry bots in a big open area that all have homing launchers that will kill you in one, maybe two shots if you're lucky on hard mode. And keep in mind, there are no health packs throughout the game on hard throughout the game. None. None. Well, that's not true. There are health packs on the easier difficulty settings. On hard mode, you get no health packs at all. And you want to know how much armor you get? An armor pickup, maybe 2. And sometimes they're not even full armor pickups, they're half armor pickups. Have fun with that knowledge. The only way that I have found to clear the game is through cheap, slow hacks. The first part is that for the first half of it, there's a big like laser laser scanner that you can switch over to lethal mode. So in order to avoid fighting the sentry bots and wasting ammo, you basically piss them off, lure them to where the sentry gate is, turn the sentry gate over to lethal mode, and it'll basically stun lock and kill them in about like 5 seconds flat. The trouble is the sentry bots move so goddamn slow that you're basically going to be wasting time forever and a day in order to get to them. The other part of it on the big one that I mentioned, the big room that I mentioned with all the homing laser bots or homing launcher sentry bots, sorry, is that there's a turret on a rail that you can control, like a rail bot that shoots lasers, and you basically have to draw them out to where the rail bot is and then shoot them in the legs until they die. Because if they're in full view of you, they will shoot down the rail bot, and there it goes. Now you have to kill them using your ammo. But again, they move so slow that you literally just have to wait for the chunk, chunk, chunk of it. So what becomes infuriating if you try to do it the normal way now becomes tediously monotonous and boring when you try and use these techniques. It takes about an hour and a half for me to beat this on hard mode. And you want to know how many times it took me before I finally beat it when I was going through hard mode the first time? 27. 27 separate fucking times before I beat Robot Factory on hard mode. That should say it all. That should say it all. So, yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. It is easily my least favorite level in the entire franchise, and quite possibly one of my least favorite levels I have ever had the misfortune of playing is Robot Factory on hard mode. You know, you Dark Soul, you Soulsborne fans ain't got shit on us Timesplitters 2 hard mode veterans. You don't, okay? Next up is the final level of it, Space Station X. Has all the hallmarks of levels that I don't like. The fact that, there's a time limit, which is dependent on difficulty as well. So on hard mode, you only get like 4 minutes at most in order to do everything. Confusing layout that makes it very easy to get lost, and which is a bad thing for a time limit. A lot of enemies that just continually respawn. A turret section that takes forever. Things that take forever are very unmemorable. Music staying very drab design. Very disappointing end, all things considered. So yeah, I would put it in terrible tier, but really it's the last stage of the game, so it kind of gets a bit of a respite. All right, now we move on to Future Perfect. First off is Time to Split, the first level of the game. It's a solid level, all things considered. The music's there, kind of a bit generic in its presentation. You face off against a lot of Reaper splitters. The thing about Time Splitters Future Perfect though is that there's a lot of great character interaction in Future Perfect between you and your compatriots and like mission control and everything. Which is where a lot of the humor comes from. It's probably one of the funniest games I've ever played. Um, and there's really not that much in Time to Split. Um, it's also not too challenging, but also a bit too easy. Even on the hard difficulties, it's all right. It's a good starter level. I just think that come on, the first level of the second game is literally an ultimate tier. This is an all right tier. That kind of tells you everything you need to know. Next up, Scotland the Brave. This is a great level. Great leitmotifs all around, especially with the tank boss. Leitmotif is pretty awesome. Great environment, great interaction between Captain Ash, good enemy variety. A lot of variety there. There in terms of the level design, not too difficult, but not too difficult, but not too easy either. It's honestly a pretty it's honestly a pretty awesome level, all things considered. So yeah, Scotland the Brave is in great tier. Next up is a Russian Connection, where you go back to 1969 to meet with Harry Tipper, who has been a constant reoccurring character throughout the three games. The first half of this level I don't like at all because it's basically a forced stealth level. And it's one of those annoying forced stealth levels where if you get spotted at all, you basically are you might as well restart, especially because you have to snipe enemies from a perch in order to protect Harry while he does whatever he wants, which is always fun right then and there. The second half just kind of turns to generic sort of um walk through, shoot bad guys, that sort of thing. There's some funny interactions here and there, but for the most part, it doesn't really. It's not a level that I look forward to playing every time. So mediocre it goes. Next up is the Kalos Express. You're on a train. You have to move through a train. You have to kill enemies on a train. You have to shoot helicopters from a train. It's a pretty cool train level. I am a sucker for train levels in games like this. The only thing I will say is that there's one section with noxious gas that's a bit cheap in my opinion as far as trying to figure out what the solution is. But other than that, it's a solid level, all things considered. So yeah, put it in good tier. Mansion of Madness. I actually really like this level a lot. Um, Fantastic atmosphere to it. Zombies that do wield guns like in the first game, but aren't as cheap about it. You get a lot of great interactions between all the characters. There's a very spooky atmosphere to it. There actually is a lot of genuine scares as well. Uh, as well, I mean, literally literally the boss battle in the level is you facing off against against a deer head that's stuck in the wall that turns out to actually be like an undead deer carcass with like the deer head attached to it, and the deer head obviously looks like the possessed deer head from Evil Dead 2. it's a pretty fun level, all things considered. It actually manages to be effectively scary, which you wouldn't think that for a game like this that can be lighthearted, but it actually is actually does have some good horror vibes to it. Great level. I enjoy it a lot. I can't say the same for the following level, mainly because okay, in the second game there's also this weird thing where there's a gimmick where there's like past and present Cortez. Cortez is the big guy who basically just looks like a Wish.com version of Riddick. Um, he's excuse me about that. Um, he's the main protagonist in the second and third games. But there's this gimmick that they have where like past Cortez and present Cortez kind of intermingle with each other to do certain things. It's a clever way to to explain some of the time travel mechanics and actually leads to a bunch of creative scenarios. But there are also moments where you have to defend like past and present Cortez, and it's not. And when it happens, it can feel cheap because, and I think What Lies Below is a perfect example of this because, in the first half when you're playing like Cortez 1, you have to defend um, Cortez 2 while he takes out a bunch of ghosts with basically a ghost gun. You know, that's what they call it, a ghost gun. While from zombies, of course, a ghost can also take you out and also take Cortez out. Cortez out. So trying to like balance everything is always fun. From the zombies trying to kill you to zombies trying to kill Cortez and all this other stuff. It's and the fact that it's another one of those forced escort missions where you know the character moves slowly and you kind of have to go along at the same pace. I hate it when games do that. I'm kind of glad we got out of that. That's like one pastiche of the GameCube of the sixth generation of consoles that I don't miss at all. And then you and then in the second half of the level, you then play Cortez 2, and you actually have to take out all the ghosts while defend Cortez 1 from the ghosts while he defends you from the zombies. Again, it's got the same exact problems. The boss fight at the end isn't really inventive either. I mean, the design for Princess is pretty cool, but you know, it's just a big giant monster that you just shoot at it until it dies. The only redeeming factors of it are a couple of funny moments in like the underground labs where you can like mess with the zombies and the and the ending cutscene's pretty funny as well where like the antagonist of the game, Jacob Crow, his old self goes back in time to go to his younger self while he younger self younger self, and his younger self confuses it confuses the older version of him for his granddad. Seriously, watch the cutscene on YouTube. It still makes me laugh even to this day. I think it's those moments that kind of keep it from being like from being lower on the list and just kind of bumps it into all right tier. Um, Next up is Breaking and Entering, where you go into the future at the eugenics building and yeah, break and enter. The first half of the level is kind of like a forced stealth section where there's a bunch of laser gates and security cameras and robots that will one shot you, more or less one shot you if you're dead, if you even get to it. The only weapon you've got is the mag charger, which in multiplayer, the mag charger's broken as shit because it works like the Far Side from Perfect Dark, where you can basically snipe enemies through walls and you get like a thermal vision scope in order to help you out. But and the game proper, nah, nah. I mean, it keeps the vision mode thing where that you can detect electronic locks and what have you, but it doesn't shoot through walls because of course it doesn't. Um, wouldn't want it to be too broken now, would we? So that happens, and then you get a forced turret section where you have to protect Amy Chen from a bunch of bad guys who go in. And for some reason, I don't know if it's just my copy of it, because I've got like a GameCube copy of it. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just my copy, maybe it isn't. But for some reason, if you go to a particular section of when you're doing the turret section, if you go to like a particular corner or what have you at a specific time, the game without fail freezes constantly. So you basically just have to scrap your entire progress and start from scratch, which always pisses me off. I don't know if this is a glitch relegated to just me. I don't know if this is a glitch that other people have seen. I don't know if this glitch is just on the physical copies of the game and on what physical copies, or if it's on Dolphin or what have you. Somebody please clarify it for me. But it always pisses me off when it happens. But other than that, outside of a couple funny moments, like the elevator section is pretty funny. The awkward elevator conversation between Amy and Cortez is pretty funny. Other than that, there's not a whole lot memorable about it. The music's just kind of there. The environmental design isn't really all that creative, and you're just kind of facing off against a bunch of generic security mooks for the most part. So yeah, it's pretty mediocre. Eugenius Eugenics. I don't like this level either. There's not as many funny bits as in the previous level, barring one really really funny bit uh, in the ending cutscene. Again, same generic drab level design, same music that's just kind of there. It tries to throw gimmicks at you, like you have to face off against like Timesplitter human hybrid experimentations, but you can only kill them with one specific weapon that makes them explode, which is always fun to face off against, especially when you're facing off against security forces with rapid fire futuristic P90s that'll shred your health in seconds, because that's always fun. Um, what else? The one thing that really does piss me off about this is that there's towards the end of the game, the final like set piece of the level is there are four Cortezes all at once. Two of them are taking out defense turrets that take way too much health, and you have to play as those two Cortezes and try and defend the other Cortezes while they hack. The others involves you actually having to hack the terminals themselves under a time limit. And I freaking hate the terminal sections of it because, and maybe this is just me playing on an old CRT TV. I'm sure if you play it on an HD TV, it's not that big of a deal. But it's a red, green, blue sort of like um connect the lines sort of game. You know the ones I'm talking about. Which feels really clunky enough as it is, but on CRT TV that I play with, the blue lines are far, far too dark. So you have no idea where they're supposed to go or where they're supposed to be. And I have died so many times not being able to figure out where the hell the blue lines are supposed to go. Just because of how bad the lighting is. Again, I'm sure on like Dolphin emulator or like an HD TV, or even using like the the aftermarket HDMI converters that some people have made for the GameCube. I'm sure it's not that big a deal, but I like playing my old retro games on old retro hardware, which includes CRT TVs, and it could just be my model of TV. It's pretty old, but I can never figure it out just because of how fucking indecipherable the blue lines are. Plus, I just don't like puzzles like that in any game. I'm okay with it in like adventure games, horror games, what have you, even if I do find them tedious. But in a first person shooter, nah, dog, not my thing at all. Especially when you have to combine it with like a defensive um thing. And if you fail at any point during the any one of the sections in that particular set piece, you have to start over from the beginning. Cause that's always fun, right? Ugh. Yeah, that's terrible. Next up is the Machine Wars level. Um, this is where you do come across the funniest character of the game, R110, who is basically like a psychopathic 6-year-old in robot form. He's easily the funniest. It like imagine if you combined HK-47 and Bender together, and you saw the horrific love child that would spawn from such a formulation. That's kind of who R110 is, and I love and I love the big doofy bastard to death for it. Um, the robot designs in the Future Wars levels are really cool. The music can be hit or miss sometimes. I don't think the music is that great in the Machine Wars. The environment is very much a very the environment and level design is very much a very drab pastiche of the bad future that's seen in the Terminator movies. Lots of ruins and cities and what have you. There's one particularly annoying turret section that really just sucks the fun out of it, as all turret sections are wont to do in 2000s era shooters. Um, but other than that, I don't really have a whole lot of complaints about it. But at the same time, outside of the cutscenes, it's not really that memorable either. So it's all right. Um, something to crow about is a bit more difficult. There are tougher moments to it. There is more enemy variety in there. I do like the improved environmental design of actually being in like the big eugenics building with the corporate offices and all that. I think that actually manages to. It does look more visually appealing to the eye. Again, even if the music does kind of let it down, and there's more humor to it. Big issue I have though is Jacob Crow as the boss fight. That boss is bullshit. Okay, he is bullshit. He takes way too much punishment for what? Way too much punishment, even by like you know and of boss level standards, he takes way too much punishment. It doesn't help that the hitboxes are really wonky on him, and his attacks just hit like a motherfucker, especially in the harder difficulties. So if the Crow boss fight was better designed, I would put it in maybe good tier because I do like some aspects about it, but otherwise, he it really does knock it down. I was gonna put it in mediocre tier just because of the Crow boss fight, but everything else about it, I think is fine. Um, you take the high road where you go back in time to Scotland. Um, there is a you're going back into the level of Scotland into the Scotland level, which you would think would be a positive, but it's really kind of in the dungy, dingy sort of steampunk inspired underground labs to it, which don't have a whole lot of memorability to them. Neither does the music, in all honesty. I mean, you face off do get a new weapon in the form of okay, think before you speak, dumbass. Think before you speak. You do get to fight off new enemies in the form of like really cool steampunk robots called Robot Louis Stevenson, which I will admit is pretty clever. And you do get to shoot giant harpoons at them in order to kill them because that's the only weapon that does. And there are again funny moments um throughout the level, but it's really nothing too memorable. So mediocre at best. The Hooded Man. You you ever wanted an entire mission where it was a defend your past self mission? Because that's what it is. That's what it is. That's what the Hooded Man is. You're basically playing time to split from like your past self going back in time to defend yourself. You only get one weapon throughout, one maybe two weapons throughout, but you're basically using a sci-fi sniper rifle, and once again you are defending your past self from enemies. The problem with those enemies is that they're the time splitters of the game, which are these big orange lumbering fuckers, and that can also turn invisible, just like the Reaper splitters, because of course they can, and they take a lot of damage, they take off a lot of health, and they come in swarms. Now, normally this wouldn't be a bad thing if you weren't fighting on an orange planet where the enemies can easily blend in and take off a bunch of past Cortez's health until it's too late for you to notice. And the fact that you're basically doing this from like a sniper position, just like you were doing back in the Russian connection, ugh, and again on a very drab level with not a lot of memorable music to it. I think you do get some amusing lines with R110, but it's not enough to redeem it. It's honestly the absolute low point of Future Perfect for me because it encapsulates everything about the kind of the more gimmicky sections of it that I really cannot stand into one disgustingly obnoxious glass of piss. So, yeah, it's terrible. And then finally we get Future Perfect, the final level of the game where you're basically facing off against Crow's form. Again, basically just kind of shoot it till it dies. It's not nearly as cheap as it is in Something to Crow About, and you do get more options there to help you out, and the hitboxes aren't as dissonant, but again, mediocre at best. So yeah, that is my off the cuff ranking of all the Time Splitter levels. Just just trying to do everything. I mean, if I wrote a script out and everything, I'm sure all my thoughts would be more concise and everything. But again, that's what these tier. But again, you make tier list videos kind of off the cuff and everything. So there you go. So yeah. Uh, that's all I gotta say. I did like making this video just because I like talking about Time Splitters because I think Time Splitters is incredibly underrated. And it deserves more love across the gaming community in general. It deserves more love. People should love Time Splitters more, in my opinion. They should. They should. It's a good, solid gaming series. And I wish I could say to recommend it. Unfortunately, I can't because I think only 2 is available on the Xbox One or Xbox Series X Game Pass. 2 is the only one that's available. Everything else, is either physical copy and it's only for that one specific platform. Everything else, you basically have to track down a physical copy for it, and they're getting really stupid expensive, which sucks. But them's the breaks, I suppose. But regardless, thank you all so much for watching this video, watching this tier list. I will try and figure out more tier list ideas in the future. I will get around to Dead Space at some point. Maybe I'll go through my back catalog of videos and upload some video clips that I've saved of me and my friends being a bunch of goobers and jagoffs playing video games. You know, more three idiots stuff, of course. But until next time, guys, take care, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!